Coming along tonight. There is, if anybody's bought their voting papers, there is an opportunity to put them in the box, but if you have, I ask you to do that now so we can get them included in the final results. So, nope, nobody's getting up, so everybody's voted already. That's good, thank you. So first, so welcome everybody. Oh, there we go, one. Very good. Okay, so they'll get sent off now, and they'll be included. We'll give you the results of all the we'll give you the results later in the meeting. So, all right. So you see from the agenda, it's we've got a reasonably tonight. As you can see, we've got a number of resolutions we need to cover off on. You will hear from myself as chair, and then obviously Tim Mackel, our chief executive. You will also hear from David Evans, who's the General Manager of Corporate Services, who will present the group results to you. Ian Brown is representing our Farmer Auditor Committee, and he'll report against the key project outcomes, and John Gregan will speak for the Director Remuneration Committee. So that's kind of the agenda for tonight. Okay, and you get plenty of chance to ask questions as well. So towards the end of the AGM, I'll ask Peter Shute, who's one of our independent directors, will be sharing the results of the DairyNZ Board of Directors election, the election results from that. Do we have any apologies from the floor? William and Jeanette Lefrank. Yep, okay. Let's get there. Is someone writing those down? Yep. Any others? No, I've got two here, one from Joe Luxton and one from Malcolm Ellis. I'd like to introduce you to the board, the DairyNZ board, and so I'll call out their names, and so if you just put your hand up or just stand up when I introduce your name so everybody knows who you are. So if I go through, so Elaine Cook, Jacqueline Raworth, Tracy Brown, Colin Glass, and the independents, those are the farmer elected, and the independents are Helen Anderson, and Helen will farewell Helen tonight after 10.5 years, so I'll talk a little bit about that a bit later. Peter Shute, Joe Coughlin, and Marianne McLeod, who will be replacing Helen on the board as an independent. And we've also got Richard McIntyre, who is our current Associate Director. And Tim, you'll all know, and Tim, I think you'll later on introduce your team. Okay, thank you. For the first one really is the approval of the minutes. So I'll ask a couple of the board members to approve those. So firstly, Helen, would you like to approve last year's minutes? And I'll get Colin, I'll get you to second that, if you will. Thank you. So yes, I'll take those as passed. All right, it's been a very busy and challenging year for not only our industry but the sector as a whole in New Zealand. COVID was one of those major unanticipated events which affects all of us as Kiwis. It affected not only New Zealand either, it affected much broader than that. But it has also helped create an opportunity to highlight the value and importance of our sector to New Zealand, and particularly to New Zealand's future as well. So I think people have become more aware of that, so we need to continue to think about how we continue to actually really give that message across. So. Dairy Tomorrow continues to deliver on our commitments under the Dairy Tomorrow strategy, which is a sector strategy, and it's a combined effort by the sector involving DairyNZ, Federated Farmers, DCANZ, Fonterra and Dairy Women's Network. And so, and I know when we put that strategy in place, a lot of farmers were engaged and were part of that process as well. So we're well underway of implementing all the work streams to deliver on those commitments. So DairyNZ continues to have a key role in achieving the strategy as we lead 4 of the 6 total commitments and coordinate the overall implementation of that strategy. and it pretty much shapes all of our investments in DairyNZ and a lot of our thinking. Dairy Tomorrow also shapes our research and the development funding decisions, policy activities, projects and future planning. To support Dairy Tomorrow, DairyNZ is focused on delivering our overall vision, delivering a better future for farmers. A key part of this vision are our activities to shape a better future for our sector going forward. A constructive relationship with government is central to our strategy and shaping a better future for our sector. We have called them out from time to time, as you'll know, when we felt we needed to, and such as with some of their water reforms and winter grazing rules. But our preference is always to try and work constructively with them and try and get better outcomes for farmers, because we believe that at the end of the day, that's what delivers the best results. Doesn't mean to say we always get our way, but we do find that we at least have better outcomes that way than the alternatives say. So we have developed pretty good relationships with the Prime Minister and a lot of her key ministers, and over the last 3 years, while we have not agreed with the government on every policy issue, we have had some pretty robust discussions over some of the decisions that they've wanted to make or have made. And we've achieved, we believe, some really important concessions, which I'll touch on shortly. And I guess concessions may be the wrong word. It's really engaging with them so they kind of understand, quite often what we find is people make decisions based in Wellington about their view of the world and about their view of the regions, and what we try to do is help inform that discussion to try and get better outcomes for farmers, but also for New Zealand as a whole. Okay, so I think that's probably a better way, in my view, to sort of articulate what we try to do. Our focus this term will be continue to work closely with government to ensure policies are pragmatic, based on good science and evidence, and give time for our farmers to make appropriate changes where required. Talk about Mycoplasma bovis. It's been a big issue in this area in particular, as you will all be well aware. So we're happy to take some questions in the question and answer session later if you have any. But we believe we are making good progress towards M. bovis eradication, even though there have been a few new cases come up recently. But we still feel the program is on track. There are currently only 3 properties confirmed with active M. bovis, with 249 other properties which have had confirmed cases and have been cleared. There are currently 62 farms under notice of direction. Remaining vigilant and not easing off is critical, and that's both for us as being more directly involved in you, but also farmers really continue to make sure their on-farm biosecurity policies are robust as well, and trying to protect themselves as much as they can. As we continue, we're on track to achieve eradication, we believe. There's still a lot of hard work ahead, and we do expect to find more infections as the program continues. Because this is a 10-year program, as you remember, and we're 2 years into it. DairyNZ continues to be actively involved in the program at both the governance level and on the ground supporting farmers. Over 1,000 farmers have used the free DairyNZ and beef and lamb compensation assistance service and benefited from a faster claim than they otherwise would have. A total of $182.2 million has been paid out in compensation to date to affected farmers. The Biosecurity Response Levy that funds dairy share in the M. bovis program was reduced this year. It was 2.9 cents, as you'll know, and it's 2.4 cents this year. And there's an element, because the program's been going 2 years, there's an element here of catching up. But as we go into sort of the next phase in the program, we start to, once we've caught up on our commitments, we expect those numbers to drop off significantly. That's the way it's looking at this stage. The biosecurity levy, I've talked about that. So, a comprehensive evidence-based DairyNZ submission on the freshwater reforms and thousands of submissions from dairy farmers contributed to positive changes to the action for healthy waterways packaged over the last year. Farmers expressed concerns that the proposed nutrient limits and requirements to move existing fences would impose substantial cost on rural communities without achieving the outcome sought by the package. We want to make sure that if improvements are being made, that the actual cost of making those improvements actually justify the benefits that are going to be achieved. Analysis by our farm quality scientists showed that the nutrient limits proposed in the package were not based on robust science or relationships, and our model indicated that the package could reduce New Zealand's overall GDP by over $80 billion over 30 years, as it was originally proposed. And for those of you any of you who have read the DairyNZ submission, it was very comprehensive, and at the end of the day had quite an impact on actually changing, on the debate that went on and some of the changes that we managed to get through. So I think it's a hats off to the team that put that together. So, while these are wins, we know that it will still be very challenging for farmers going forward to meet some of the new requirements. And these are not set in stone yet. We continue to try and influence where we can, both at the central government limit and, of course, a lot of the regional councils will now have to actually implement those. And so we're actively working with the regional councils about how they actually get implemented and how they interpretate those rules. So we'll continue to advocate for rules that are pragmatic, evidence-based and implemented across appropriate timeframes. In October in 2019, the government accepted a farming sector proposal, which is called He Waka Eke Noa, for those of you who are not familiar with it, to work together to build a farm-level emissions reduction framework. Farmers benefit from the partnership by avoiding a system through the ETS that would have been similar to a tax on production of up to $47 million. So that's kind of that was being proposed initially. Primary sector organisations, Maori and government are now combining their expertise to support farmers to measure, manage and reduce emissions on farm going forward. He Waka Eke Noa aims to build knowledge so that by 2022 all farmers know their emission numbers, and by 2024 a system for farm level accounting and reporting of emissions is in place. So that's the time frame they're working to. By drawing on a growing body of knowledge, we are working towards having all farmers and growers be able to include climate change emission and adoption activities in their farm environment plans by 2025. Okay, and we're pushing hard for environment plans to be the mechanism that a lot of these new things are being implemented through. So, thank you, and there'll be time for questions after Tim's presentation, and now I'll hand over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you, Jim. Welcome everybody to our AGM on this beautiful night in Ashburton. Look, I just want to quickly introduce our team, my team that are here tonight. So if I can just get them to stand up as I read out your name. Firstly, Bruce Thorold, Strategy Investment Leader for New Systems and Competitiveness. We've got David Berger, who is also a Strategy Investment Leader but for Responsible Dairy. Sharon Morrell, a General Manager for Farm Performance. We've also got David Evans, who is our General Manager Corporate Services. He's also our CFO. And Amanda Woodbridge, General Manager Marketing, Communications and Engagement. Also want to acknowledge Tony Finch as well, who's our South Island Hub Lead down the back there. And we've got a few other staff here. Welcome to you guys too. As Jim said, the past year has been another full-on year for dairy farmers, for you all, and also for DairyNZ. And as Jim's also mentioned, supporting farmers through COVID earlier in the year was certainly an unanticipated challenge for us all during the year. But you know, farmers and also our team at DairyNZ both rose to this challenge, and I have to say, absolutely proud of the way our sector responded to that. But at the same time, we've all had to work on a range of other issues and dealt with those too. For DairyNZ, we have a purpose that is, yes, we have a purpose that is about delivering a better future for farmers. Plain and simple. It's all about our work for you guys. And we do that in three ways. Firstly, developing solutions through science. Secondly, shaping a better future for our dairy farmers. And Jim's touched on some of those initiatives and activities already. And lastly, supporting better farming locally. So they're the three core areas that we work in on your behalf. Jim has touched on some of those things already, as I mentioned. And I'm going to pick up on the shaping a better future area too. So the first thing is vision is clear. The vision is clear, shares stories of environmental change and look, with a growing number of Kiwis, and it really is changing the public's view of dairy farming for the better, and we've got evidence for that. The radio, print, online videos led to about 220,000 people visiting the Vision is Clear website in the past year. It reached about 500,000 people on social media every month. Look, an example of the stories actually posted on the Vision is Clear program is the work being done by many of you in the Selwyn and here in the Hinds catchment to reduce nitrogen losses and improve the environment. So a lot of good stories. In our most recent public perception survey that we've done, we found that further improvements, this is the evidence I spoke about, so 70% of those surveyed who had seen the Vision is Clear say they feel positively towards the dairy sector, compared to 59% of people who had not seen the campaign. We also know there's a lot of evidence to show that people who have seen the campaign but understand that it's all of our responsibility in New Zealand to actually contribute to water quality improvement. So look, it is making a difference. The survey found that overall 73% of people felt positively towards dairy farmers, and that we think does reflect the impact of Vision is Clear, but also the initiatives of other, whether it be Dairy Women's Network or dairy companies like Fonterra's initiatives, campaigns that other people are engaged in, but also dairy's increasing importance to our economy and the public's understanding and feelings towards that. And particularly the dairy farmers are doing a good job. So look, there's actually some real improvement there. We've got to keep building on that and build that connection. So a second focus I mentioned earlier as part of our purpose is to support farmers at a local level as we continue with the way we farm. So one key initiative in terms of staff, of course, that was really heightened and exacerbated by COVID was the supply of staff this year, particularly because of disruptions to immigration, but also it was an opportunity to help New Zealanders as well with placing people who have been displaced by their jobs or through their jobs onto dairy farms. So it is about attracting and training Kiwis for dairy farming jobs. It's been a partnership with MPI, but also Ministry for Social Development, MSD, and also it's had the support of Federated Farmers in framing this up and working it too. So look, it does offer New Zealanders who have lost their jobs due to COVID-19 an opportunity to partake in farm-ready training. Online training course first for a week. If they get through that and they want to carry on 2 weeks of practical stuff about technology and pasture and so on, working with animals, finding a job. Practical training has happened all over the country, in fact also here in Canterbury, and we've worked with different providers to do that. It's fair to say it's slowed down lately, and we're just taking a look at this, but we certainly believe it's going to be a really important thing for us next year, particularly given the uncertainty around immigration for next year and that ongoing need to bring Kiwis into our sector. So in terms of other key initiatives during the year, as I said earlier, there's been a lot of work through that COVID lockdown period with farmers. It did become a very significant focus for us, particularly through April and May. And I do want to acknowledge partners through this. And again, besides being incredibly proud of dairy farmers and the dairy sector, all food producers, I'm also proud of and wrapped with the way that your organisations worked together through this period. So it was a team effort, regularly meeting, usually daily, through that period to iron out issues in terms of regulations, issues that the government were grappling with too, because as we all know, there was no playbook in many respects for them too. So issues like self-isolation, moving day was a big one as well, and I want to acknowledge Federated Farmers, also the dairy companies, Dairy Women's Network. We all worked together really well during that period to help farmers. And of course, working with the migrant worker issue as well, advocating for those who are here and also addressing the issue of visas for you too. So we also, as I said, besides COVID, had to keep going with other projects. And one big initiative that we've been working on during the last year is a targeted project approach working in catchment, so Aparema catchment in Southland. Which is mainly about farm plans and looking to see how you can tweak your system and change. All flows out into an estuary system. We've got the Selwyn Hinds project here, which I'll touch on a little bit soon. Many of you, I'm sure, are involved in that. And up in the lower North Island, the Tararua's project as well, which is mainly focused on plantain and so on. So those key projects have carried on. We do fund a wide range of science, and if we can just go forward to that next slide for that. And you can read more about that in the annual report. I'm only going to touch on a few highlights tonight. So the first one is about flexible milking. Quite pertinent to this region. We've got research underway at Lincoln, and I know many farms, particularly in Canterbury and further south, have shown a lot of interest in flexible milking, with a number adopting this 3 and 2 milking for part of the season. The initial trial results did show a small decrease in milk production, so this is why it's so important that we can do controlled research, so we can quantify these impacts. And it was a small decrease, but it does show promise and potential. So we've got 6 farms now piloting this 3 and 2, again under some scrutiny through that 2020-21 season, to look at how that impacts and also benefits farm teams, given that a lot of this is about our staff and our people. So it does have some promise and some ability, and it's, I think, a good practical trial that it really came about because of farmer demand. In terms of other key research, I do want to touch on a couple of things here. Firstly, a very large trial that we've had 5,000 animals in this, looking for new traits as indicators of cow fertility. And what we found, the researchers, and this was a multi-organisation experiment, we found that high fertility BV, breeding value heifers, reach puberty earlier and have a lighter weight than low fertility BV heifers. Current findings indicate that the puberty measure is 19% heritable, which does make it significantly more useful than existing measures to select sires for this trait. The first stage, so look, I do want to acknowledge MB as well. So this is a joint industry, you all levy dollars as well as government investing in this. We've had a first stage trial of a large synthetic zeolite trial, which has found that zeolite actually reduces the risk of milk fever in grazing cows, and there's also some results that indicate the incidence of subclinical and milk fever may actually improve, or the reduction, I should say, in the incidence of subclinical milk fever improves reproductive performance. So we're now following that up as well. The low-end nitrogen or low-nitrogen livestock program is another joint collaborative effort that we've had going on, and it's looking at which genetic traits are the key contributors to nitrogen leaching on farms, developing tools potentially to breed cows with lower urinary nitrogen. It's currently underway, that trial, and look, for us, we want to put this one to bed and see whether there is actually that clear genetic correlation between animals that may put more of that nitrogen into either productive use in milk or possibly more likely into dung. We know animals do that. We don't really know whether that's something we can breed for, and we need to get to the bottom of that and put that one to bed either way. Closer to home here in Canterbury, I just want to touch on a couple of things quickly. I did mention the Selwyn Hinds project, which I think is a really exciting project going on. It's being driven largely by farmers as well as our great team here in Canterbury. And we know, as many of you know, well know and are facing this, there are some significant nitrogen loss reductions to meat, and I do want to acknowledge that with all the work through this essential freshwater process, now called Healthy Waterways, you guys in Canterbury have been facing this for some time now, with the start of the zone process several years ago, and have had some pretty lofty targets put in place for you. So it's been great to come in and work together in a real co-development sense with farmers, with a number of partner farms across these zones of Selwyn, Te Wahora and Hinds, to find options that do suit farmers to reduce nitrogen loss while maintaining profitability. So I think this partner farm model really does allow farmers to share changes that are happening on farm, and other farmers in the zone that aren't in those partner farms, through the field days, discussion groups, and talking with neighbouring farmers. And that is, as you know, one of the key ways we adapt and we get better. So a recent assessment of the sample of farms in these zones found that most farms are already taking action to reduce their nitrogen losses and already have a plan to achieve their targets. So I do want to commend the farmers here on that basis too. So, I think the other key thing we're really excited about is your learnings and what's going on in this particular project can be shared nationally as well. And as we know, this stuff is coming for everybody. At a more, specific level, there's also been some other things going on in Canterbury. People Expo in Canterbury in February had about 100 people come along to that. We've had GoDairy training, like I said earlier. We have done a lot of work in this advocating for migrant workers. Again, acknowledge Federated Farmers for that partnership, and that's such a key issue for this region. And of course, we have, as Jim said, and will continue to work to seek pragmatic solutions for the application of the rules of this essential freshwater framework. So looking ahead, in terms of investment, this really just shows you where your levy investment is going for the year ahead. As you can see, the bulk of the investment goes under what we call Commitment 2 in our Dairy Tomorrow strategy, which is building competitive and resilient dairy farming businesses. So there is a lot of stuff in there, as there are in the other areas. And as I said, you can find more detail if you look into the annual report, which you should have found on your seats. So in terms of key projects ahead, one thing I do want to just signpost is a project we call Step Change, which aims to tackle the three key areas or challenges that we face in the short and medium term. That's profitability. How can we increase profitability and at the same time reduce our footprint? So water quality and greenhouse gas emissions. And I think, this is what many would claim would be a wicked problem or challenge for us going forward. How do you get sometimes those competing drivers, if you like, working in the right direction? So progress on these fronts will ensure that dairy farm businesses are fit, we believe, for whatever comes in the future. So that's a really key project, and I'd encourage you to get involved if you haven't already. I'm sure some of you have. We will continue to advocate into next year, as Jim said, on this freshwater application of the rules at a ground level. We will continue to look to invest in opportunities for research that helps underpin those goals as well, about sustainable and profitable farming. As I said, GoDairy training we believe will be important next year as we prepare to get ready for the next season. And lastly, I just want to mention too that we're exploring practical alternative options for bobby calves in our sector. And again, I know farmers are doing that too on the ground. We'll learn for that. So look, I'm going to wrap up now, and I do want to finish just by some thanks. Firstly to our board, to Jim, firstly here, who has worked really closely with us through the year and with me in particular, and always gives a heck of a lot more time than he probably has, and that commitment has been greatly appreciated by me and the staff, from Jim and the whole board. I know that Jim's going to talk about Helen, but I won't get to stand up again other than questions, so I'd like to thank you sincerely, Helen, for 10 years at DairyNZ. I don't want to steal Jim's thunder, but from my perspective, I just want to say that she's had a huge impact on DairyNZ and on dairy farmers. For me, she's been a CEO before, and she brings a huge amount of experience, particularly with what happens in Wellington, and that's been invaluable for myself and for staff. So thank you for that, Helen. Great challenge, great wisdom from you, and support, mentoring, all that stuff. And I think the other thing is it highlights to me the importance of independence, that the directors, what they bring to our boards. So that's a really important thing too. Again, Jim will probably mention that. Lastly, our staff. Thanks to the team. We've got a dedicated bunch of people at DairyNZ. Again, I'm really proud of the fact that our staff know why they work at DairyNZ, and it's about delivering a better future for farmers. So I want to have a special thanks to them, and in particular here, Tony and the Canterbury and the whole South Island team. Thanks very much. Ka kite anō. Cheers.
All right, now we're happy to take some questions. Like, you'll get a chance to ask some more questions a bit later on, because I'll get David next to talk about the financials, and then Ian and John will come up, and so we can cover off on those. But if there's any questions about Tim or my presentation, happy to take those now. None? We did get one online, as people had the opportunity to put questions in online, and this is one from Sarah, who is an open country dairy supplier, and who is joining this meeting as being live streamed too, for those of you who are not aware of that. And Sarah will be watching in the live stream. So I think, so Sarah asked, I would like a review of the current biosecurity levy paid for our milk suppliers. I believe this levy is unfairly placed on dairy farmers, and as M. bovis nears eradication, we should have a time frame imposed for the removal of this levy. So I know the biosecurity levy, it's a biosecurity levy, it's not an M. bovis levy. And I know so it's at the moment, of course, it's only being used for M. bovis, and unless something else untoward happens, then as M. bovis, the program runs out, then that levy should be zero rated at that point in time. But it's not, we don't have the ability to actually do away with that levy because it's the government that put that in place. And but I think if a new incursion comes, David, maybe you can deal with it. My understanding is that that we will start as part of our GIA agreement with government. We will engage with them because I guess as an industry we have agreed to actually co-fund M. bovis on your behalf, and so I think there'll be a similar process in place, won't there, David, if a new incursion comes, whatever that might be. So okay, to answer that question. So not sure if there's no other questions. If not, then I'll hand over to you, David.
Thanks, Jim. Good evening, everyone. So tonight I'm just going to present the 2019-2020 financial results for the consolidated DairyNZ group of entities. As an industry good body, DairyNZ's primary objective is not to make financial gains, but to invest levy funds to provide new and better outcomes for dairy farmers. For the 2019-20 year, DairyNZ recorded a small deficit of $267,000 compared with a surplus of $542,000. Before I go on, I just want to touch on COVID-19 in regards to the financials. The year for DairyNZ finishes in 31 May, so there was very little impact on COVID in relation to the financial results presented. As you all know, the dairy sector continued to operate throughout that period, and so therefore the levy income was not impacted at all. We were also fortunate that our projects could continue throughout and deliver on milestones, and this was with our staff predominantly or mainly working from home. This also included DairyNZ being able to manage any large research trials that were running or about to start. So the integrity of the trials was maintained and there was minimal disruption or unnecessary costs incurred. I'll now just touch on a few details around the financials, looking at levy revenue, the second year of investment into our Dairy Tomorrow commitments, and also close out on the M. bovis sort of from a cost point of view and the dairy contribution to the M. bovis response. So financial results sort of summary, it is a snapshot. Milk production, we had a record year of 1.896 billion kgs of milk solids. So that's the highest year for production, not from previous years. Cash position was 18.5 million, an increase of just over 3 million. A lot of that was to do with the timing and collection of the M. bovis levy revenue. Members' funds remained consistent at 41.1 million. A small decrease is reflected from the deficit. DairyNZ's revenue for 2019 year was 84 million, 2.3 million increase on the prior year. Our revenue, we look at our revenue in three main categories: levy, the government co-funding, which has been mentioned before, and then other income, and I'll touch on that further. Group expenditure for the year was 84.2 million. This was a 1.2 million decrease on previous year. Our group expenditure is made up of two main categories: investment expenditure and operational. No, go back. Oh. Okay, so we'll carry on to the next slide. M. bovis. DairyNZ continues to support the M. bovis response, both in collection of the dairy share of the levy biosecurity levy on behalf of the Crown, and also in providing experienced staff into key positions within the response. The biosecurity levy came into effect in September 2019. At the start of 2020, DairyNZ informed farmers that the levy will reduce from 2.9 cents to 2.4. This was possible after DairyNZ considered the current commitment of dairy's share, as well as looking forward at the future years' costs, budgets and forecasts in the current and years beyond. To date, the total cost of the response has been $463 million. This is made up of operational costs and compensation costs that Jim referred to earlier. The cost share agreement has the Crown paying 68% and industry 32%. The dairy share of the industry's contribution is 94%, which equates to about 30% total share of total costs for dairy. Aligning to the Crown fiscal year, dairy share of costs for both response and compensation equates to $132.8 million. So that's total costs to date. That's what the dairy commitment is to repay through the biosecurity levy. During the first 9 months of the levy, at a rate of 2.9 cents, DairyNZ collected and passed back to MPI $47 million. In the current 2020-21 season, the biosecurity response levy is forecast to recover approximately another $45 million. So in addition to collecting the biosecurity levy on behalf of the dairy farmers, DairyNZ continues to provide staff time into the response to work in the recovery area. Since the start of the response in July 2017 through to May of this year, DairyNZ has contributed over $5 million of staff time cost. So just in summary, DairyNZ has reported a small deficit for the year and completed the second full year of investment into the Dairy Tomorrow commitments through its investment in projects and initiatives. It has also, as I just mentioned, continued to provide support through the bovis response. DairyNZ continues to maintain a strong balance sheet and will continue to look at leveraging more non-farmer funds in the future to invest in new projects to meet the continuing challenges that the sector faces. Thank you. I will now pass back to Jim for questions.
Thanks, David. Any questions of David around the annual results? Nope. Question?
The money you've paid for the bovis control, you've given them whatever million. Where are you getting the accountability, the books back, and the barrels spent?
Yep. Yeah. Do you want me to answer that? Okay, so industry partners with the MPI commissioned KPMG to do a review, which effectively was an audit of the 2018-19 costs, and we've received back that findings, and we're working through, or MPI is working through the findings because they're the agency responsible for delivering the response, and DairyNZ is very much sort of holding them to account to make sure that all the outstanding or the findings of that report are followed through on. We sit at the governance table, Tim and Colin, so that transparency is maintained at that level. And we believe there's benefit in having another review, similar review, financial particularly for the year that's just been. Yep. So, Colin, do you want to make any additional comments to that? I think because Colin, David said Colin and Tim both sit at the governance level, and I'd be fair to say this is a new way of operating for MPI to truly be in a partnership. And so we've had both Tim and Colin at that governance level, just trying to make sure we sort of drive those things. You might want to make some comments, Colin.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, David. Neil, in terms of the question around the accountability, there's a number of processes in place. David's already referred to the KPMG report, and kicking off very soon, as Jim's alluded to, there's a review that's about to be underway to report back in the early stages of next year around the project or the program to date. I guess it's important to remember, though, that this is the first time that industry's partnered with government, if you will, with MPI around a program of this nature. And there's been, as we all know, a number of shortcomings, and I guess there's a lot of people in this audience that can relate to that firsthand. At the governance table, we've been requesting regular reports around breakdowns of costs like the cleaning and disinfection costs, where there has been quite a big spread, and we've been getting accountability back from MPI around some of those costs, as well as that the KPMG report that David referred to highlighted a number of areas for improvements, and at the governance table we're waiting to see those broken down and also quantified for this upcoming season. So we've got those checks and balances in place, but that review will provide quite an insight as well into where future biosecurity incursions, if and when they come about, can be guided by this experience that we've been through as well. So yes, there is accountability, Neil. That's the main part of it.
All right. Any further questions? You have the results today, so thank you. Then I'll ask you, Ian, to come up and talk about. Ian, of course, as I've said before, is the farmer auditor. Is representing the farmer auditors, and so maybe Ian, you can come up and just introduce yourself a little bit, and then also about, I guess, maybe give these people a little bit of an insight about what it is actually you do on behalf of farmers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. A little bit about myself. That's a pretty old photo, I believe. So. Quite some time ago. I'm a dairy farmer from Tokoroa. It's my background, come through the industry, working for wages, come out of town, worked for wages, share milked, purchased a farm, second farm, and continuing to be a dairy farmer today, and spend a bit of my time doing what I term industry good roles from my perspective. So the DairyNZ Audit Committee is one of those. I also serve on the Osprey Stakeholders Council on behalf of DairyNZ, as well as several other roles in demonstration farms at Cambridge and a local rest home. So a bit of background about me. Thank you, Jim. Anyway, onto the audit committee report. So I am one of the farmer members on the panel, and it is my privilege tonight to present the Audit Committee report on behalf of the panel. The panel consists of 2 independent farmers and 1 independent consultant who is also the facilitator. The panel members are Anne-Marie Wells, who's a farmer from Dunedin, James Morrison is our independent consultant, and myself. So this is the 11th annual independent audit process and is undertaken with the aim of ensuring transparency and accountability. DairyNZ audits its investment portfolios annually to provide confidence to levy payers that the levy is being invested in their best interest. So just before I get into it, I will use the term KISS a lot, which stands for Key Indicator of Success, and I think they've already used the acronym SIL here for Strategy Investment Leader. So an interim meeting was held in January 2020 to review the progress and clarify expectations. DairyNZ compiled a report of achievements and the evidence to support those. The auditors then met with the strategy investment leaders and selected DairyNZ management to review the achievement of the KISS targets in June 2020. A key indicator of success represents the annual milestones along the journey toward the long-term objectives and targets of the DairyNZ strategy. In 2020, 16 key indicators of success were deemed to represent the necessary achievements of DairyNZ for the year. Some of these targets had multiple components. The auditors choose to use a partially achieved assessment where the KISS has multiple components, and some of these have been achieved. The auditors concluded that DairyNZ has clearly fully achieved 6 of the 16 KISS targets in 2020 and partially achieved 6. And our scoring is 50% overall. The overall result is lower than the previous year. The KISSs for 2020 were aligned to the following strategic goals. 10 KISSs were aligned with Commitment 2, competitive and resilient businesses. 4 of these targets were fully achieved, with 2 partially achieved and 4 not achieved. 2 KISSs were aligned with Commitment 1, nurturing the environment. Both of these targets were partially achieved. 2 KISSs were aligned with Commitment 5, great workplaces for New Zealand's most talented workforce. Both were achieved. 1 KISS was aligned with Commitment 4, animal care. This was partially achieved. And 1 KISS was aligned with Commitment 6, vibrant communities. This was partially achieved. Overall, the achievement of 56% of the KISS targets is a low result. The auditors understand this may partly reflect additional stretch in the targets. However, the difficulties of coordinating with external parties over the lockdown period and reprioritising of resource to respond to, for example, the essential freshwater proposals are likely to have compounded this. The disruption due to the COVID-19 shutdown may have been exacerbated by the scheduling of crucial activities in March and April, which is logical when you think of the farming year in terms of the timeframes that farmers have available. But it highlights the risk of dependence on a tight window. The quality of reporting and the close alignment of the self-assessment by DairyNZ management and the independent judgment of the auditors reflects well on the DairyNZ management. The approach of providing auditors with electronic access to the evidence files is a welcome innovation and made the process very efficient. The KISS targets cover 5 of the relevant commitment areas from Dairy Tomorrow, compared to 3 in 2019, and this is a more balanced approach. The auditors note that the KISS documents and evidence reflect a huge achievement by DairyNZ, and the people who have delivered these results should be commended for their work. Thank you.
Look, I'm happy you, Ian, if you just don't go away too quickly. Is there any questions of Ian around the process and the results? No? On you.
Thank you, Jim.
Cool. Okay, and I think now we've got the 2 resolutions, haven't we, Ellie? We've got the results of those two. Yep. I've got them here, haven't I? Yep, cool. I had them before, actually. Oh, here we go. And I've got them right here. Okay, so resolution 2, the approval of the audit accounts. Can we have a show of hands, please, for all those that are actually happy to approve the audited accounts? All those in favour? Against? I'll deem them passed. And the 3rd resolution is the appointment of KPMG as the auditor. And can we also have a show of hands for that, please, that we're happy to reappoint KPMG as the auditors? For and against? Anybody against? I declare that resolution passed as well. Thank you very much. Now I'll ask John Gregan to come up and speak on behalf of the Directors' Remuneration Committee. And John, I'll give you the same opportunity just to introduce yourself and let them know a little bit about yourself. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I'm John Gregan. I'm dryland farming in South Canterbury and very dry land farming at the moment. We're looking for a bit of rain. It's been a tough start for us at this stage. My wife's actually very involved in DB CAT, which is a compensation team that works in with DairyNZ and Beef and Lamb. In fact, I got a text from her just before. She's flown back. She goes to Wellington 3 days a week now, works with MPI. And her bag's been lost on the way home, but she's got plenty of shoes left at home, so she won't go without any shoes. I'm a levy payer and a member of the Remuneration Committee, along with Dave Gascoigne, who's chairman, and Andrew McGivern. And I'm here to present our recommendations to the meeting. Our job on the Directors' Remuneration Committee is to recommend to levy payers what we think the directors and the chairman should be paid. Our terms of reference state that it is our role to annually review and recommend any changes that should be made, and that we should ensure that an appropriate level of remuneration to attract and retain directors is maintained. To help us to make this decision, we're given a few things to consider. We're given market information by strategic pay, which talks about equivalent companies throughout New Zealand and a few in Australia, and what directors are being paid in those companies. We compare Dairy New Zealand fees with other similar companies in the marketplace here in New Zealand. But it is difficult because although the income's part of DairyNZ, it's a very complex type of company, and it's not all about income, it's providing services to farmers. We also take into account the time spent by directors preparing and attending board meetings and other business outside the boardroom. And we combine this with a bit of hopefully common sense and some considerations on what other levy payer people would think if they were in our position. So this year we have decided that, taking all this into consideration, and we've been very mindful of COVID-19 and the additional bovis levy that farmers have had to pay, and we think it's prudent to keep the remuneration levels at their current levels. So our recommendation is that the chair and the director fees not be changed from what they were last year. And last year we introduced a fund of pool payments, which is used at the chairman's discretion to remunerate people who are chairman of different committees within the directors, and also for directors who have perhaps put in extra hours over the months, and that is at the chairman's discretion. We would like to continue on with that pool to be available. And we also want to recommend that the daily rate for the associated director remain at $800. So if I have any questions or any clarification people would like.
Questions to John? Can you get a lightly, John?
That's good.
Yep, sorry about that. All right, so the resolution is the approval of the director remuneration. That was a postal vote, and so that farmers have supported that by 88.75%. So thank you, John, and thank you guys for all your work on behalf of farmers. Thank you very much, John. Cheers. All right, okay, the next two resolutions are for the board board appointed directors, which are, to remind you, that's Peter Shute, who is being reappointed for another term. And Peter's been on the board for a while and chairs the Audit and Risk Committee on behalf of DairyNZ. And Marianne McLeod, who is the new appointed director, Marianne. And so she'll be replacing Helen as the third independent, so on the board. So, and I'll just make the point, I think Tim made it already, but I think, you know, the value that the independent directors do bring, the skills they bring, the life experiences they bring, and their strategic thinking that they bring, and their that they bring to the board and add to the pretty robust discussions we have at once. So I guess when I thank them all really for their contributions. So okay, and those that resolution has also been passed for both of them by over 90%, which is a good outcome. Thank you. All right, so the next one on the shoot is the final results of the director elections. Have they come through yet? So Peter, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Jim, and good evening. Firstly, just want to thank you very much for your support for the ratification of my appointment to the board, and I'm sure I speak for Marianne as well in terms of her appointment to the board. So thank you for that support. In relation to the directors' election votes, firstly, I just want to say thanks very much and acknowledge that Colin and Cole and Jim have put their names forward to stand for election to the board, to the two vacancies. The successful candidates in alphabetic order are Colin Glass and Jim Vanderpoel, and the unsuccessful candidate was Cole Groves. So I therefore declare that Colin Glass and Jim Vanderpoel to be elected to the Board of Directors of Dairy New Zealand. So congratulations to those two, and again thanks Cole for putting your name forward.
And so just look, and first from my perspective, and I'm sure I speak for Colin as well, or maybe Colin can speak for himself, but just do want to thank farmers for their continued support, and do want to thank Cole for putting his name forward, and that's what elections are all about, of course, and giving farmers options about who does represent them on these governance roles that I think are so important for us as a collective industry, really. So I will give one last chance if there are any questions or any general business questions that anybody has before I sort of start wrapping the meeting up and we can get back to the social side of this. Brian.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, as a farmer, 38 years, I've been paying levies to DairyNZ, and the world's changed. 1.5 million people, 300,000 kilos of milk fat in those days to where we are today. And I could give up tomorrow. I mean, the media, the people, you're doing really great stuff as far as making us better farmers. We are better farmers. For the general public, and the way the worlds are today, we need a change of direction or a new bit of hump. Because, 17 farmers and 24 dairy farmers got fined for breaking the law. There's 100 district councils, only 2 got prosecuted, never get mentioned. As farmers, there were 17,500 submissions to David Parker's Freshwater Accord. There was 2 of his government committees said, you can't do this, David. And they did it. We actually need to get, militant is the wrong word, we actually need to get aggressive in what we do, whether it's marketing, whether it's something else. We're doing great things on the farm, but we actually need to get Auckland and Wellington, because at the moment we've got a 26-year-old Green Party member got elected in Auckland this year. In 10 years' time, there could be 5 of those. They have no real connection to rural New Zealand. We all can have electric cars. Hang on, who's going to pay for them? There's a breakdown in our society, and it's gone from when I started, everybody was connected to Tokoroa to rural New Zealand. Today, we have 5 million people. Auckland and Wellington, you win those elections, you control this country. So I actually think we need a marketing campaign that actually says what we do, what we actually worth. Because I listen to the radio, I listen to what you see in the Stuff News, and we're the worst people in New Zealand. We are, destroying New Zealand. Yet I believe we're better farmers than we've ever been, and the truth's not getting out there. And you are the people now. I went to Fonterra and said, you need to do this. And Fonterra say, that's not my job anymore. We're only 8% of the industry. DairyNZ represents every dairy farmer. Okay? So we need, maybe it's another levy, 2 cents or whatever, to get out there and put billboards and say, when you fly to Queensland on your holiday, you're using more carbon than a dairy farmer. Because we don't get that information out there. And you can't get it published in the stuff, in the newspapers, because it's not good, not the news they want to print. They want to print about a dairy farmer, but at a puddle on his farm, it became ponding. So we actually need a strategy from DairyNZ going forward to be an aggressive marketing campaign in our main centres of what we actually do for New Zealand.
I think that those are good points, Brian, and as you can imagine, we've had some pretty robust discussions around those very things. And as you know, that it's always easier to get bad news out there than good news, and there is an absolute truth in the fact that, that if it's an issue with our fellow New Zealanders, they don't appreciate what we do and what we are and a lot of the good work that's going on, they'll feel the need to express that view at election time, and then of course you get governments come in that believe they have a mandate to then follow through on that. I think dairy farmers, you are right, we're as good a farmers as we've ever been. Doesn't mean to say we're perfect yet, and doesn't mean to say we're continuing on this journey, because we are, and we're continuing to sort of improve and do better. But it's a bit, I think it was talked about before, and Tim covered it in his presentation, and the vision is clear, it's just one of those mechanisms. and that we try to use to actually make sure if we're serious about water quality, for example, it's actually all New Zealanders' responsibility. And nowadays, the worst quality water is not those that run through or from your dairy farms. It's the ones that actually often run through Auckland. And so, and it's not about us. We don't think it's about us pitching ourselves against our New Zealanders. It's sharing our story and understanding, so there's a better understanding about what we're doing and the contribution we're making, and around our animals, around our water quality, our, how we look after our communities. And we do think about that a lot. We are trying really hard to make that impact. I think it's a fair point that we're probably not getting as good cut through as we are. But and it's fair enough that like most things, people think everything's DairyNZ's problem, and we've got to do it all on 3.6 cents, or 2.8 cents, because 1.8 cents of that goes to the TB levy. And we are reviewing in DairyNZ quite closely now exactly, are we doing everything? Are we allocating our resources appropriately? Is everything we're doing creating real value going forward? Can we do things different and better? We're going through that exact process as we speak. But I think the point you make is absolutely valid, and we ask ourselves that question all the time. And could we do better? Absolutely. And is this a collective industry issue? Absolutely. It's not us alone. It's us. It's you guys. It's don't underestimate how impactful farmers are. When farmers tell their stories through the media, through social media, tell their good stories about what they're doing on their farms, what they're doing. I think it's an us. It's not a you. It's not a me. It's an us thing. So it's a collective us, really, to try and work out. We absolutely have to play our part in that, and we play a critical role in coordinating that, and we have to do better, absolutely. So I don't know, Tim, if you want to add into that?
No, sorry. Look, Brian, great challenge, and would have been surprised getting out of here without that tonight, because it is a top issue we know for you as farmers. In fact, when we went on the road last November, December, pre-levy, it was one of the top 3 issues, across the country. So, but I completely agree with Jim. We've all got to work together on this, and I don't want to make light of how farmers feel about it. I mean, my family farm, and it's in my roots, and I know how that has felt, particularly in Canterbury, so close to Christchurch for so many years. But at the same time, if you look at the data, and the good thing about our data is that we do understand, from the public perception results and from the analysis that we get monthly of media, that it's actually not as bad as what it feels like. So, in fact, the number of negative articles that come out every month is probably in the 6 to 7%, or possibly negative, but everything else is either neutral or positive. Every month, the media, we analyse that. And as I said earlier on, the public perception has swung up a little bit lately, which again it's not surprising given the fact that New Zealand is starting to really understand the importance at the moment of primary production and food production. So can't rest on our laurels, agree it's still an issue, and we've got to build off that. I think there's some light at the end of the tunnel now, and let's grab that and work with the public. And with the government too. So, and at the end of the day, the last thing is, the thing that drives the greatest positive perception from here is our performance. So we can put out the fanciest campaigns and so on, and they're important and they're useful, but that in itself won't solve the problem. I think we've got to keep showing the great results that are happening, things like the Selwyn Hines catchment project and things that farmers are doing in real life, and that comes back to what Jim said, telling your stories. I think that is the most powerful thing. Last thing I'll say, no pressure, Amanda. We've got a new general manager, comms and engagement. So she's heard your challenge, Brian, and she'll be making notes and getting onto it tonight.
Okay.
The question you probably don't want to answer, but the new government in Wellington has informed yet. We're all very worried about the health of rivers, regulations of rivers, some sound about river work. What can we realistically expect, and what changes are likely, and what's DairyNZ's strategy with other business partners and engaging with the new government around trying to get some practical change?
So I think I'll just answer from a governance point of view first, and then I'll let you just repeat the question. So repeat the question. So did everybody hear the question? Okay, everybody heard it? So I think, Craig, from our perspective, absolutely new government. We don't know who the new Minister of Environment is going to be yet. It's interesting, if you look at the election results, there's a lot of votes come from rural communities, as well. So this government in the moment is, particularly the Labour Party, it's really governing all of New Zealand now. It's really got support from all over New Zealand, including rural communities, and so I think, I don't know what that will do to their thinking, or what that will do to what sort of arrangement they'll have with the Greens going forward, and who the minister will be. And I think we'll just wait and see how that plays out before we think about what our strategy is going forward around that. We have spent the last 3 years, as we shared with you already, trying to build relationship with all the key people, there, and we've got a good relationship. Doesn't mean to say that we get what we want, but at least we've got the opportunity to actually give them a call, talk to them, get in the same room with them, share our views, and actually get them to understand some of the implications of some of these rules that are being imposed or being introduced, and so, the freshwater rules the way they are, I guess, they're far from perfect, they're absolutely, and so we continue to work, and I'll get Tim to talk about, because what we've managed to do is, of course, they put these rules in place at a central government level, and you get a lot of people that work in high-rise buildings in Wellington, they think that know what's best, and they write these rules. And I guess, we have been shut out of the process a lot of the way, and we've tried really hard to get in there as much as we can, and I think, that in going forward, we'll continue with that, as we understand, what the implications of these rules are and share with them, and they keep telling us there's still opportunities to tweak them, so we'll continue to work on that, but also I'll let Tim talk about it, but what we've managed to do, because, of course, they can write the rules, but they've obviously got to be implemented through the regional councils, and how the regional councils interpretate them and the timeframes they put on these, because we worked hard to make sure that these were intergenerational, and so people had time to adjust to them, to actually think about them. We can see how they will play out, and hopefully, continue to actually have them evolve as we go forward, and understand the implications of them. And so through the engagement directly with them and through the implementation group, we're trying to work out to make sure that they are as robust as possible, and as practical as possible, and as robust as from a scientific point of view as possible. So I know, Tim, you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Jim. Just to add to that, Craig, on what Jim said, so in a practical sense from here, the government, Minister Park, has put together a Healthy Waterways implementation group, which and its job really is to take the rules as they stand in the NPS and the NES, the National Environmental Standards and so on, and then help translate that into a set of standards and around, for example, farm environment plans that then regional councils can then take away and start to implement across the country. So on that group we have various stakeholder groups, if you like. So the regional councils themselves are there represented, and you've got Kahuai Māori group as well. You've got some NGOs are on that group, government officials, and also 3 industry representatives. So we've got Beef and Lamb, Hort NZ, and DairyNZ, and that's me on that group at this point. So a big job ahead to try and achieve agreement and consensus at that group. Ultimately, the minister will make the call if we can't agree on various aspects, but it does give us that opportunity to at least be at the table. And I think what's going to be really important is actually bringing a level of understanding of what's going on out there right now, because I think we've got to build a lot more trust towards our intent and what we've been doing. I do lament the fact, and perhaps related to what Brian was talking about as well, that there's not a deep enough, even a basic understanding in many quarters of the work that is being done, across the country by dairy farmers, the huge effort, and we've got to keep telling that story. So that's going to be a really important part going forward. And I think, from a DairyNZ perspective, we're absolutely committed going forward, as we said earlier on in the speeches, that we will put a lot of resource into this and work with partners like Federated Farmers, like Beef and Lamb, dairy companies like Fonterra and others as well, to try and get the best outcomes, which is really, pragmatic solutions that we can cope and deal with, that will give those benefits to the environment, to water quality, but at the same time make sure we have viable and prosperous future as well. Important for New Zealand as a whole. So that's our commitment. We have got a great water quality science team. So I will say one last thing before I pass back. Even I think the understanding, and this rests back on us to tell that story as DairyNZ of what your levy has been going towards and the work as well. You know, we've got a great team of water quality scientists who frankly wouldn't work for DairyNZ if they didn't think they were going to make a difference, you know, to farmers but to the environment too. It's as simple as that. And I keep telling the government that these people come and work for us because they think and know that they can actually make a difference. And so one key project we've been investing in for several years now, David, is one with a Dutch crowd called Deltaris, who David Berger here used to work for actually. Maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe longer perhaps. 5 years we've been investing your levy in a joint project with Deltaris to build a catchment model approach so we can model nutrient flows and waterways at a catchment level. Now the government hasn't done that. No one's done it. You've done it through your investment. That's the kind of thing we need to actually bring to the table and make sure that people understand we're serious about playing our part. We just need to do it in a way that suits the environment but also New Zealand.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Right.
I take a bit of offence to your New Zealand supporting the new Labour government. You give everybody another public holiday, give 5 days sick leave, and you turn around and spend $1 billion a week on wage subsidy, and you wonder why they got the majority government.
No, I'm not wondering why, I'm just saying they did.
Yeah, I mean, you change the way we.
Yeah. No. But I guess the point I'm trying to make there, Brian, is that they did get support all over the country. We can argue about how or why, but they did. You know, and I guess in a way, then that means they are truly representative of not only people in cities but rural New Zealand as well. You know, they are representing them, and I guess it's for us to actually bring that to the table and actually help them actually understand what rural New Zealand need from their support. So, any other general business questions? So, no, if not, then I'll, I guess before I close the meetings, just one last thing I'd like to do, and Helen, we seem to be saying goodbye to you all the time. No, not at all. It's on the contrary, and I guess that this is just an opportunity in front of farmers and on behalf of farmers, really, to really thank you from the bottom of our hearts, what you have contributed over the last 10.5 years. You know, because Helen has been a huge contributor to the board on your behalf. You know, and Helen brings that kind of Wellington perspective to us and helps us to try and understand what drives Wellington and what drives them and what makes them tick, and and brings that with them, but also her strategic thinking, and I think there was a lot of education went on in those first few years, Helen, about some of our terminologies. I won't repeat them here, but Helen looked us off and said, "What's that all about?" But Helen, you've made a huge contribution. We really thank you heaps for that. And Helen, and one of the things we gave Helen last night, or the team put together, is Helen got a T-shirt, that says "I love dairying," and she's promised to wear that down the main street of Wellington for us. And so, Helen, look, on behalf of all the farmers here, but all the farmers in New Zealand, thank you so much for your contribution. You've done a fantastic job. Thank you. And with that, I'll declare the meeting closed, and please join us. I think there's a few more refreshments and bits and pieces at the back, and it is your levy that's paying for them, so you might as well enjoy them. Thank you.